They say some houses don't just hold memories. They trap them, and if you listen closely enough, you can still hear the ones that never left. This is the true account of what happened to the Miller family in 1971 at a house the locals still whisper about, Brackenmoor House. Brackenmoor House sat on the edge of the Pennines, a mile outside the small village of Weatherden. It was a tall, slate-roofed building with ivy crawling up its sides and chimneys that always seemed to smoke, even when the fireplaces were cold. For years, it stood empty. No one could afford to fix it. No one wanted to. But in the summer of 1971, Thomas and Eleanor Miller signed the lease. They were newlyweds. Thomas worked as a postman, Eleanor part-time at a local bakery. They had a little boy, Henry, just 6 years old. When they found Brackenmoor House listed for half the usual price, they thought they'd struck gold. The locals warned them. The woman at the shop counter said, "That place is wrong, love. Folk don't stay long up there." Thomas laughed it off, but when they arrived with their belongings, the air already felt different, heavier, colder, as though the house was watching them. The first week was quiet. They painted the walls, unpacked their boxes, and tried to make it a home. Eleanor said the house creaked too much, but Thomas insisted it was just the old wood settling. Then, one night, around 11 p.m., they heard footsteps above their room. Slow, heavy steps pacing from one end of the attic to the other. Thomas grabbed a torch and climbed the narrow stairs. The attic door groaned open, but there was nothing there, just old beams, cobwebs, and the smell of damp air. A few nights later, they heard it again. Same time, same pacing, always stopping above Henry's room. Thomas checked the attic again, but this time, the door was locked from the inside. No wind, no drafts, no explanation. Eleanor started noticing other things. Every morning, the same framed photo of their wedding would be turned face down. The old radio in the sitting room switched on by itself, playing nothing but static. And there was the knocking, 3 loud, hollow bangs from somewhere inside the walls, always 3. At first, they thought it might be pipes, until Henry started saying things that made no sense. He'd wake up crying, saying, "The man upstairs won't stop walking." When Eleanor asked who he meant, Henry said, "The man in the hat." After 2 months of sleepless nights, Eleanor went into the village to ask about the house's past. The locals were reluctant to speak, but one old man finally told her. Brackenmoor House once belonged to a family named Pembroke. The father, Edward Pembroke, had been a coal merchant in the early 1900s. He lost his business in the Depression. Something inside him broke. One winter night, he locked his wife and daughter in the cellar, set the house on fire, and then hanged himself in the attic. Only the house survived. They say Edward's body was found swaying from a rafter, still wearing his brown suit and bowler hat. That night, Eleanor woke to the sound of humming, a low, tuneless hum coming from the hallway. When she stepped outside her room, she saw a tall shadow at the top of the stairs. A man, pale, still, wearing a brown suit and bowler hat, but his face was nothing but darkness. She screamed, and it vanished. Thomas searched the entire house, but there was no one there. No footprints, no signs of entry. From that night on, the footsteps grew louder. Doors slammed by themselves. Lights flickered. The family's dog refused to enter the hallway. And every evening at 11 p.m., the house came alive. Footsteps, whispers, and that same dreadful humming. It escalated one night when Henry screamed from his room. When Thomas and Eleanor rushed in, the boy was pinned to the bed as if an invisible force was holding him down. His blankets were pulled tight, and his skin was covered in hand-shaped marks. Then, every door in the house slammed shut at once. The walls vibrated with the sound of heavy boots running across the attic floor. Thomas grabbed Henry and shouted for Eleanor to get the car keys. As they fled the house, something shattered every window on the ground floor. All at once, they drove to Eleanor's sister's home that night and never went back. Weeks later, Thomas returned with 2 friends to collect their remaining belongings. When they opened the front door, the air was freezing cold. Dust covered everything, as if years had passed instead of days. And above them, from the attic, came the sound of slow, heavy footsteps. When Thomas's friend called out, "Who's there?" the answer came. 3 loud knocks from inside the walls. Brackenmoor House still stands today. Empty. Windows boarded up. Locals say no one's lived there longer than a few weeks. Every tenant tells the same story. Footsteps in the attic. A man in a brown suit. And 3 knocks that echo through the night. Some say it's Edward Pembroke, cursed to walk the home he destroyed. Others say the house itself remembers and repeats the pain it once held. Whatever the truth is, if you ever find yourself driving through Weatherden after dark, and you see an old house with ivy crawling up the walls, don't stop, because some houses don't forget, and some ghosts don't forgive.